For 15 years, my boss who told me, "You are nothing," was laughing when he put the resignation letter on my desk that day. But what he didn't know was that I had been documenting every dirty penny of theirs for 3 years, and next Monday I would be at the prosecutor's office doors. For 15 years, my boss who told me, "You are nothing," was laughing when he put the resignation letter on my desk that day. But what he didn't know was that I had been documenting every dirty penny of theirs for 3 years, and next Monday I would be at the prosecutor's office doors. My name is Oliver Richardson, 47 years old, senior accountant at Blackstone Manufacturing in Birmingham. For 15 years I had been the invisible man in the corner office, the one they called when numbers needed fixing, but never when credit was being handed out. My desk was positioned perfectly to hear every conversation, every whispered deal, every casual confession of corporate misconduct that echoed through the open plan office. It started small, the way these things always do. My manager, Harrison Wright, would make little comments during team meetings. "Oliver here is our detail man," he'd say with a condescending smile. "Not much for big picture thinking, but he can spot a misplaced decimal." The others would chuckle politely while I forced a smile and returned to my spreadsheets, my cheeks burning with quiet humiliation. Harrison was everything I wasn't. Charismatic, well-connected, from the right family. His father had been on the board before him, and Harrison carried himself with the casual arrogance of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. He wore expensive suits, drove a Bentley, and made sure everyone knew about his weekend golf games with the managing director, dropping names like breadcrumbs at every opportunity. The verbal abuse escalated gradually over the years. What began as professional dismissal became personal attacks designed to humiliate me in front of colleagues. "Oliver's having one of his special moments," Harrison would announce when I raised concerns about irregular expenses. "You know how he gets about his precious procedures." The finance team would exchange knowing looks, and I'd feel my face burn with shame and suppressed rage. 3 years ago, during a quarterly review meeting, Harrison stood before the entire department and delivered what he thought was his masterpiece. "We're restructuring the team for efficiency," he announced with theatrical authority, "which means some of our more traditional approaches need updating. Oliver, you'll be handling basic data entry from now on. We need fresh thinking for the analytical work." Fresh thinking meant bringing in his nephew, James Wright, a 24-year-old economics graduate with zero accounting experience, but the right surname and family connections. I watched as my responsibilities were stripped away, my expertise dismissed, my 15 years of institutional knowledge treated as obsolete baggage that needed discarding. But Harrison made one crucial mistake that day. He assumed that humiliation would break me, that I'd quietly accept my demotion and fade into corporate wallpaper, like so many defeated middle managers before me. He didn't understand that when you push someone into a corner for long enough, they start paying very close attention to everything around them. That afternoon, as I cleaned out my old office to make room for James, I noticed something interesting in the recycling bin. Invoices that didn't match the official records, expense reports with suspicious signatures, and payment authorizations for companies I'd never heard of in my 15 years at the firm. My accounting mind couldn't ignore the discrepancies, even in my diminished state. So I started keeping copies. Not out of malice at first, just professional habit ingrained by years of meticulous record keeping. But as the patterns became clearer, as the numbers told their ugly story, I realised I was documenting something much bigger than petty workplace politics. Harrison and his circle weren't just incompetent bullies, they were systematic thieves. The systematic theft became impossible to ignore once I started looking with the right eyes. Every Friday afternoon, when most of the staff had left for weekend drinks, I would stay behind to catch up on data entry. In reality, I was meticulously photographing documents with my phone, creating a digital archive of financial irregularities that would make any forensic accountant salivate. Harrison had grown bolder in his contempt over the months following my demotion. During the Christmas party last year, he'd cornered me by the photocopier, while the rest of the team celebrated nearby. "You know, Oliver," he said, swirling his whiskey, "I've been thinking about restructuring again. Data entry can be outsourced these days, cheaper that way." His smile was predatory, designed to remind me how precarious my position had become. What Harrison didn't realize was that his casual cruelty had given me something invaluable: motivation. Every snide comment, every public humiliation, every reminder that I was expendable had sharpened my focus. I began staying later, arriving earlier, and using my invisibility as a weapon against him. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening in March. I was alone in the office, uploading weekly expense reports, when I noticed a pattern in the vendor payments. Cromwell Construction Limited had received payments totaling £47,000 over 6 months for facility maintenance. The problem was I'd never seen any maintenance work being done, and our building was managed by an entirely different company. I pulled up the vendor registration forms from the filing cabinet. Cromwell Construction Limited was registered to Harrison Wright at his home address in Edgbaston. My hands trembled slightly as I photographed the documents. This wasn't creative accounting or aggressive tax planning. This was fraud, plain and simple. The mobbing intensified as I got closer to the truth. Harrison seemed to sense that something had changed, though he couldn't pinpoint what. His nephew James, now installed as senior financial analyst, began making pointed comments about office security and the importance of discretion. "Some people," James would say loudly enough for me to hear, "don't understand professional boundaries." The pressure campaign reached its peak during a team meeting in April. Harrison stood at the head of the conference table, his expensive suit immaculate, his confidence unshakable. "I want to address some concerns about information security," he began, his eyes finding mine across the room. "We've had reports of unauthorized access to sensitive documents. Everyone should remember that employment contracts include strict confidentiality clauses." The message was clear: stop digging, or face the consequences. The entire team avoided eye contact with me as Harrison continued his veiled threats. I nodded along with everyone else, playing the part of the chastened employee, while my phone buzzed with notifications from the document scanning app I'd been using to build my case. That night, I sat in my small flat in Moseley, surrounded by printed evidence of Harrison's elaborate scheme. Bank statements, falsified invoices, forged signatures, and a web of shell companies that all led back to the Wright family. The scope was breathtaking. They'd stolen nearly £200,000 over 3 years, using their positions to authorize payments to companies they controlled. But I needed more than just financial evidence. I needed proof of intent, of conspiracy, of the systematic nature of their operation. So I did something that 3 years ago would have been unthinkable. I started recording conversations. The tiny digital recorder, purchased with cash from an electronics shop in the city centre, became my constant companion. Clipped inside my jacket pocket, it captured every meeting, every casual conversation, every moment when Harrison and his accomplices thought they were safe. The recordings revealed more than I had ever imagined possible. Within 2 weeks of starting my covert documentation, I had captured Harrison discussing the creation of additional shell companies with his nephew James. They spoke casually about maximizing extraction opportunities as if they were legitimate consultants rather than corporate thieves. The most damning conversation happened on a Thursday morning in May. I was in the filing room, officially reorganizing archived documents, when Harrison and Managing Director Edward Blackstone walked past discussing operational adjustments. My hidden recorder captured every word as they stood just outside the door. "The beauty of it," Harrison was saying, "is that we control both the authorization and verification processes. Oliver's demotion was perfect timing. He was the only one who might have spotted the patterns." Blackstone's laugh was cold and calculating. Sometimes personnel decisions solve multiple problems simultaneously. Harrison's response chilled me to the bone. "Don't worry about Oliver. He's broken. 15 years of gradual undermining has destroyed his confidence. He won't cause trouble because he doesn't believe he's capable. Besides, who would believe him? A disgraced accountant with a grudge." I stood frozen in the filing room, hands trembling as their footsteps faded. They hadn't just stolen money. They had systematically destroyed my reputation as preparation for their crime. The demotion, the public humiliations, the constant undermining. It had all been calculated to ensure my silence. That afternoon, I accessed the vendor database and began cross-referencing payment histories with company registrations. What I found was a masterpiece of corporate fraud. 7 shell companies, all registered to Wright family members and associates, had received payments totaling £437,000 over 4 years. Cromwell Construction was just the beginning. Wright Property Services billed for non-existent cleaning contracts. Blackstone Consulting charged for meetings that never happened. Millennium Security Solutions provided security services that consisted entirely of Harrison's brother-in-law cashing monthly checks. Each company was carefully structured to fly under audit radar. Individual payments stayed below board approval thresholds. The invoices were professionally formatted with enough legitimate detail to pass casual inspection. If my humiliation hadn't motivated me to dig deeper, the scheme could have continued indefinitely. The psychological warfare continued as my investigation deepened. Harrison began scheduling performance reviews every 2 weeks, using them to itemize my failures and remind me of my precarious position. "Your attention to detail has declined significantly," he would say, reviewing perfectly accurate spreadsheets. "Perhaps the pressure is beyond your capabilities." James joined these sessions with obvious relish, asking pointed questions about my commitment to the team and understanding of professional boundaries. They suspected I was onto something but couldn't prove it. So they tried to gaslight me into abandoning my investigation. But their harassment had an unintended consequence. The more threatened they felt, the more they huddled together for damage control. My recorder captured detailed planning sessions where they discussed contingency plans, problematic documents, and revealed their full network. By June, I had documented a conspiracy involving Harrison, James, 6 other employees, and 2 external accomplices. The evidence included audio recordings, photographed documents, bank statements, and a comprehensive timeline showing the evolution from opportunistic theft to systematic embezzlement. But I needed one final piece: proof they were planning to destroy records and eliminate witnesses. That proof came sooner than expected. The final evidence arrived Friday afternoon, July 15th. I was working late when Harrison and James entered the adjacent conference room, thinking the office was empty. Their voices carried through the partition as I sat motionless, my recorder capturing every word of what would become the most incriminating evidence in my collection. "We need to accelerate the timeline," Harrison said, voice tense. "New external auditors start Monday. Pemberton and Associates are thorough. They'll spot irregularities within weeks." James sounded panicked. "What about the documents?" "We can't make 4 years of records disappear without suspicion." "Actually, we can," Harrison replied coldly. "We're blaming it all on Oliver. Disgruntled employee with system access, performance issues, recently demoted. The narrative writes itself." My blood ran cold as Harrison outlined their plan. "We'll discover irregularities Monday morning, express shock, then reveal Oliver had unauthorized vendor access. James, you'll testify you noticed suspicious behavior, but didn't want to accuse a colleague." "What about Oliver himself?" James asked. Harrison laughed without warmth. "Oliver Richardson is broken, systematically undermined for years. His word against management. Besides, he'll be facing criminal charges. People don't believe accused embezzlers." They detailed their plan for 20 minutes. Plant forged documents in my desk, create fake email trails, prepare witness statements from colleagues. They'd even planned my arrest, coordinating with local law enforcement contacts. Harrison made one crucial error in his overconfidence. "We control the narrative completely. Oliver's personnel file documents his declining performance, inability to adapt. We've been building the case against him for years without realizing it." That revealed the true scope. The mobbing, systematic undermining, deliberate isolation. It hadn't been workplace bullying. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign to create the perfect scapegoat. When they left, I remained at my desk processing what I'd learned. They weren't just framing me. They were destroying my life, reputation, and freedom to cover their tracks. That weekend, I organized evidence, created multiple copies, and prepared for Monday. The irony wasn't lost. The methodical attention Harrison had mocked was about to become his downfall. Sunday nights, I composed my resignation letter. Brief, professional, giving no hints of what was coming. "Due to personal circumstances, I am resigning effective immediately." Monday morning arrived grey and drizzly. I arrived early, placed my resignation on Harrison's desk, and cleared my workspace. By 8:30, when the team arrived, I was ready. Harrison found the letter at 9 sharp. I watched his face cycle through surprise, confusion, suspicion. His eyes found mine across the office. "Oliver," he called out, "could I see you in my office?" I walked slowly, aware every colleague was watching. Harrison closed the door and gestured to the chair where I'd endured years of belittlement. "This is sudden," he said, holding my letter. "Perhaps we can address whatever concerns you have." I looked at Harrison Wright, the man who had destroyed my confidence, stolen £500,000, planned to frame me, and smiled for the first time in years. "Actually, Harrison," I said quietly, "our discussion should wait until the authorities arrive. They should be here any moment." The colour drained from his face as my words sank in. Outside the office window, I could see 2 police cars pulling into the car park, followed by a van marked "Serious Fraud Office." "What authorities?" Harrison whispered, but he already knew. The game was over. The next 20 minutes were the most satisfying of my professional life. I watched Harrison Wright realize his carefully constructed world was collapsing around him. Detective Inspector Sarah Coleman from the Serious Fraud Office entered first, followed by constables and a forensic accountant. Harrison's face went through confusion, recognition, denial, and finally pure terror. "Harrison Wright, I'm placing you under arrest on suspicion of fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering." As handcuffs clicked into place, Harrison looked at me with something approaching respect for the first time in 15 years. "How long?" he asked quietly. "3 years," I replied. "Every conversation, every document, every fraudulent payment. I have recordings of you planning to frame me, bank records showing money trails, and documentation of your systematic campaign to destroy my credibility." James was arrested 10 minutes later, found hiding in the men's toilets. Edward Blackstone was taken into custody at his home. By noon, the entire fraud network had been rolled up based on evidence I had meticulously gathered. The investigation was swift and thorough. My documentation provided law enforcement with a complete roadmap. Audio recordings, photographs, financial records, and detailed timelines created an airtight case that left little room for defense. The media attention was intense. "Accountant brings down £500,000 fraud ring," ran in the Birmingham Mail. The Financial Times published "How Corporate Bullying Backfired," the Blackstone case study. Harrison's photograph appeared on national newspaper front pages. The trial lasted 6 weeks. I testified for 3 days, walking the jury through evidence methodically. Harrison's defense portrayed me as disgruntled, but audio recordings spoke for themselves. When the jury heard Harrison describing me as broken and outlining plans to frame me, their expressions said everything. Harrison Wright was sentenced to 8 years in prison. James received 4 years. Edward Blackstone got 12 years and was ordered to pay back £2 million. Other conspirators received sentences ranging from 18 months to 5 years. The real victory came 3 months later when Pemberton and Associates offered me a position heading their new corporate fraud investigation unit. "We need someone who understands how these schemes work from the inside," the managing partner explained. "Your methodical approach is exactly what we're looking for." The salary was triple my previous earnings. Their office was modern, professional, free from toxic atmosphere. Colleagues treated me with genuine respect, valuing my experience rather than mocking my thoroughness. A year later, I spoke at a corporate fraud prevention conference. Standing before senior executives and law enforcement officials, I began. "Sometimes the person you underestimate most is the one paying closest attention." Harrison Wright was released after serving 5 years. I heard he was working as a clerk in Liverpool, his management career permanently destroyed. He sent me a brief note once. "I underestimated you." I never replied. These days, I help companies identify and prevent fraud. I teach workshops on recognizing warning signs and creating workplace cultures where dedicated employees are valued rather than victimized. The invisible man in the corner had finally found his voice, and when he spoke, the whole world listened. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be. Harrison called me nothing for 15 years. But nothing was exactly what I needed to become to bring him down. In his arrogance, he had created the perfect witness to his own destruction. Justice doesn't always come quickly, but when it arrives, it's worth the wait.